Hello and welcome to Tales from the Whisky Office, where we have a good chat with some great company over a wee dram. And I'm absolutely delighted today to welcome onto the show star of the stage and screen and recent returnee to River City. It's only Joyce Faulkner. How you doing, Joyce?
I'm nae bad, Gerry. Fine to see you this autumnal evening.
Well, look, I'm loving the mise-en-scène around the setup. You've got your Tales from the Whisky Office glass, I trust.
I have two.
Oh wow! Well, you can use both if you want. You can split it if you want.
Well,
but we'll just be using the one today, I think.
Okay, I was thinking I would maybe try some without water and some with a wee splash of water.
You're a pro, aren't you? Do you know, see, when we first talked about doing this show, when I was talking with the guys from Solid Sounds, straight away when we suggested this Tales from the Whisky Office show, they went, "We've got the perfect guest." They said, you like almost straight away, like Joyce is like a big whiskey fan. She'd be perfect for the show. Is that true? Do you like your drums?
I am, but this is my first official tasting.
Oh, exciting.
With giving feedback. I have tasted many whiskies, but this is my first public one.
Well, look, we're all just well-meaning amateurs, and that's absolutely fine, I think, in the world of whiskey. I tell you what, do you know what, we'll get into our chat in a wee second, but we might as well pour our dram. And what we have today is Aberlour 12-year-old.
An Aberlour, a Speyside.
Aberlour, a Speyside, that's absolutely correct. So we're not expecting this to be very peaty. It's a 40%. Yeah, you can probably pick it up for around £40, very reasonably priced. Not very peaty, obviously, with it being a Speyside. Let's see, straight out of the... Let's get right into the arty-farty stuff, Joyce. Let's give it a right good snifter. We kind of roll around the Tales from the Whisky Office glass.
I am quite acquainted with this malt, actually. It's one I like very much.
Really? Are you a fan more of the kind of Speyside rather than the kind of peatier?
I'll be honest, I am. I kind of take it. I like a bit of peat, but not too peaty. But I tend to go back to the Speysides.
See, I mean, like Speysides are a great kind of introduction whiskey for people, but after you've kind of gone heavy peaty, people love to go back to a Speyside or a Highland malt. This one in particular is not very peaty and supposed to be very, very smooth. Noses wise, I'm getting the kind of sherried, kind of obviously it's been aged in an oak and sherry casks.
And
I'm
very
not actually smelling.
Sweet.
Yeah, like a kind of appley, sweet tones. Look, I'm not by no means an expert. That's just all I'm kind of. Should we just drink it, Joyce?
Aye.
All right. Oh, that's beautiful. That is super smooth. I mean, you get the sherry from the taste. You're getting the sherry straight away, but it's also a wee bit spicier than I was expecting for a Speyside. There's a wee bit of spice, wee bit of pepper there. What do you think?
I'm getting spicy honey.
Oh, lovely.
If there is such a thing, I'm getting a wee bit of honey and heather because it smells sweeter than it tastes, I would say. And I didn't actually remember the wee spicy kick in this.
It has got a wee kick in it. I'm loving honey and heather. That sounds like a Scottish pop duo that we just never had yet. Honey and heather.
Honey and heather.
And the taste, the finish in the well, I tell you what, you get more of the oak towards the end. It starts off, you feel that kind of sherry cask, and then towards the end, the more kind of solidness of like the oak kind of comes through. Well, let's just sip it up and see how that kind of goes anyway. But you're a fan of the Aberlour 12?
Mm-hmm. That actually was on special a year or two. I think it might have been a couple of years ago.
Oh, right, okay. I remember. I was wondering why that's why we're tasting it. If it was on special, then maybe that's why.
No, it was a couple years back. I remember this was in special in a certain supermarket.
Fantastic.
But the taste.
So you can name drop the supermarket if you want. They might sponsor us.
I think it was the Co. I'm sure it was the Co.
The Co. Well, there you are. You find good whiskey everywhere now. That's the kind of part of the benefit. Nice, kind of nice for your returning flavour at the end there.
I'm actually going to do something that I do quite a lot with whiskey.
You're going to start dancing?
Oh, maybe. But I actually I partake of my whiskey, never ice. I am never I don't like ice in whiskey at all.
Same
but
here.
I tend to drink it in the home with warm water.
With warm water, really? What's the reasoning for that? Because look, I'm a big fan of a wee bit of water in a dram.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can definitely experience it from different angles, depending on. Look, it doesn't suit every whiskey, in my opinion, but look, it is just opinion. But I've not thought about warm water before.
Well, I mean, obviously, warm, a hot toddy. I don't know if I.
You don't mean a hot toddy one? Do you mean just a wee bit, just not cold water, rather than
just not
like room temperature?
Cold. This is a wee bit warmer than room. I'm just gonna just kiss it.
Look at this! Look at the skill handling. Fantastic. That was an expert amount there. That was a pro drop.
Just a splash, because I mean, maybe some whiskey connoisseurs would hang me for saying that.
Do you know? I just don't think it really matters that way. I mean, look, I do use a wee pipette to kind of open up the flavour. Just that one wee drop can make a difference. But you know, you're right. Just certain whiskies will take a wee bit more water to open up even further. As long as you enjoy it, that's the key thing. That
really brings out the sweetness again, strangely, with the warm water in it.
Yeah, there you are. See, that's where you get the kind of return of the sherry. Kind of comes back. Joe, let's leave it to settle. Let's enjoy that as we're kind of going through, because I want to talk about your return. Obviously, I want to talk about your return to River City, because a 13-year hiatus is quite the hiatus, really, isn't it? How did you feel watching the show all those years, having spent such a key time at the beginning of the show there? How did you feel watching it, and what was it like to return?
Well, it very much came out of the blue, because I suppose I just had thought that the expression that boat had left the harbour, ship had left the harbour. But and obviously my ex-husband was killed off. One of my sisters died. The other one, I don't. So when you're not connected to anyone,
you'd had a hell of a time.
So what was that?
You'd had a hell of a time. I mean, you really had.
That's the bonkers thing about soap. When I started to think about my previous life in Soapland, and you speak about everything you've been through, you just go, well, I mean, only in a soap. Obviously, some characters. I mean, no, but I did take quite a roller coaster as Roisin. I mean, you've taken control of that as an actor. I mean, you pick up your script, and sometimes they'll give you a clue to what's happening with you. But mind you, I suppose real life like that, is it? You know, the corner.
No, but soap acting there's an amazing grind and stamina to soap acting. I did one episode of River City, and I was blown away by the amount of rewrites and all that. Like, everyone was super lovely, like coming on set. Everyone was really nice, really welcoming. It was during your hiatus I was on, and everyone really great. But I couldn't believe the numbers of, you know, the colours that you go through for the rewrites, and then the colours, they ran out of colours, they went round again, and everyone said, "Oh, that's regular. Oh, that happens all the time." That's the norm.
It's so fast, and I mean, when I went back in, there were a couple actors, Kath Howden and Gail Telfer-Stevens in particular, that were really heavy storylines. And it kind of blew me away, just seeing how it was, the emotion was in one take. If it's running late, there's pressure on. And having been back in the theatre, where one has to admit there's quite a lot of fanning about goes on at times.
Professional fanning about.
They have the time. But there can be, I mean, you've obviously got time to discuss and rehearse things properly. But I mean, it is get up and do it, and you know, you sometimes only get one shot. No pressure,
I know, well, that kind of blows my mind, that kind of aspect of it, and the time you've got to, I mean, the worst thing I've ever found, I don't know how you feel with it, is actually changes. Learning something and learning loads of stuff is absolutely fine, but then to have that change significantly on you, and I'm not just talking about a wee line change, a wee word change here, to really kind of deviate with where the character was going in that moment, happens regularly to soap actors, because you've got to think, you know, the writers have got to think about the longevity of those episodes and what's happening 3 episodes down. How do you find that when you suddenly get that, you know, that kind of jackknife turn?
It's just, I think it's very much a different part of the brain that you're using as opposed to when you're in the theatre. And with the learning as well, I've noticed, because I mean, there's monologues and poems and stuff I learned when I was a kid and that I did in the theatre 20 years ago that I could recite off the top of my head. But I do think it's a different part of the brain in your because you're learning so fast, and it's almost like as soon as it's done, into the trash can, next lot, because there's space in your brain to learn the new stuff. Because it amazes me. I mean, folk mind lines that I said 20 years ago, and I have got absolutely no recollection of saying these one-liners, and punters will go, "Oh, do you remember the time you said?" And you're like, you don't like to disappoint them either, but
there's something special about River City with that, isn't it? I mean, see, for me, I moved back up to Glasgow about 11 years ago now, and I had quite a few pals that were in Corrie and stuff like that, and there's not the same intensity around. I mean, obviously Corrie's hugely, popular around the country. I'm not saying that, but the intensity of maybe living in Manchester or whatever isn't the same as what I've seen from my pals and people I've known in River City. The intensity, like, it seems like everyone has seen it in the city, whereas you don't get that vibe down south with other shows like that. Did you feel that kind of magnifying glass all of a sudden when you came on the show, and has it changed? I mean, obviously you're just back on it again now, but do you feel like it might have changed?
I would imagine there's the same intensity. But I don't know what the situation is with viewership, but when I was in the original cast, it was such a massive thing. I mean, I had done the first telly job in the High Road. I think it's a bit like Taggart in the High Road. So we're 50 were in it. And my first wee bit was a nurse on Take the High Road. And then, of course, I think High Road had finished by the time. There was a hiatus there before River City came along again. So I think it was so exciting.
And you have done a Taggart, haven't you? Because I've heard when I've came up as well and joining the acting kind of scene up here, there's like two types of actors. There's those who have done a Taggart and those who are NDATs. I've never done a Taggart, and that boat sailed for me.
Just two wee bits on Taggart. One was a lassie in a taxi office. It got shot up, and the other was a lassie that had been a dodgy hypnotist and thought she could swim and jumped off a suspension bridge and it glide. Luckily, I had a stand-in to do that. It was a dummy.
Brilliant. Oh, amazing.
Anyway.
I've got a friend of mine. I'm good friends with Leah McRae, who's on River City just now, and I know you've had a lot of scenes with her. It's funny you say that, don't you? You look at people heavy storylines. You see the kind of cast members that have got heavy storylines for a bit, and the workload's crazy. And I know Leah particularly, she's been kind of waiting for that to come, and it's come now. I've heard. How have you enjoyed your scenes with Leah?
Well, she's got really full-on heavy stuff at the moment as well. I mean, it can be a feast at a famine, but you have to just adapt accordingly, and you're learning accordingly, and the rest of your life according to what's in the scripts, really.
She mentioned to me something about packed lunches, something that you make a cracking packed lunch or something like that. Do you know what the heck she's talking about there?
That's a ma Brune coming out in me, you see.
Were you looking after her?
I'm a feeder.
She says when you brought in that packed lunch, she could regret. It was at that moment that she needed it, that kind of way.
She was done in, and we had scenes that we arranged that I felt that I was responsible for them being rearranged. So a wee packed lunch. She deserves a wee packed lunch after everything she's been through.
Do you think that's something that kind of... I mean, I think the other hard thing that you're doing as well is not just theatre, but see Christmas shows in particular, like the amount of, to be on form like that all the time, sometimes not just the two shows. I'll be honest, I'm not a matinee person. Because I'll give everything for a matinee and then later on, oh my God, and you can get so emotionally drained. But sometimes 3 shows and things like that, how do you find the energy for that? And is that where the kind of packed lunch kind of side of you comes from? You have to look after each other in that kind of environment. Is that how you feel?
Oh, you've got to look after each other. I mean, but you adapt accordingly. And I think the older I've got, the more blessed I realise I am at the job that I do, because the majority of folk in life have got pretty, you know what I mean? You get paid to enjoy yourself. And most of the acting I've done, I've had a wonderful time. And although it can be a graft, obviously, knocking your pan in, doing panto, as I'll be doing this year, up in my back in my home tune.
Of course.
Much looking forward to. That's what you're getting paid for. I mean,
aye.
Look at some of the folk that have been working through this pandemic getting paid rubbish, you know, for knocking their pan-ins for some really unpleasant work a lot of the time. So I think we're very lucky. Well, I certainly feel very lucky, because I've done all the, before the soap, I had done all kinds of jobs.
Right.
Getting paid to wash folks' backsides, you know what I mean, for buttons. So when you get up and entertaining folk and getting paid for having a laugh a lot of the time.
Aye. Do you know what? It's funny you say that. I was talking to a few people about this recently, and there's so many jobs you do where you graft, and then you finish grafting, you do your home life, and then you go back to grafting. Whereas at least in kind of performance, things like that, you almost it's like it gets put up on the fridge for everyone to see. So your graft gets some appreciation, you know, to have that kind of part of it. How important is it for you to get that kind of feedback every so often? You mentioned people coming up remembering those one-liners and things like that. How important for that, and how much of a boost does that give you?
I think I'm better at it now. I'm very Aberdonian that way, and that I think early on in my career I wasn't very good at taking compliments, and I think that northeast thing, didn't I get swollen? He did, and you know, it just that way I was brought up very northeast. Whereas now, I just enjoy folk getting enjoyment, entertaining them. I enjoy entertaining folk, but I suppose the accepting praise, I'm a bit better at.
Yeah, it's something it's an unusual thing to have to accept and what have you. Do you know, it's funny, we were mentioning Leah before, just you saying that reminded me when she was doing her one woman show. She said in Aberdeen, there was a woman came up to her and was like, I love that. And she said, her husband would just stood next to her like a face of thunder and not saying anything. She went, normally I just wouldn't even say anything, but she was so exhausted. She just went, and did you enjoy it? And his face kind of opened up and he smiled. He went, oh, I had to stop myself from laughing a few times.
That's very northeast. I everything to do with the expression to stop me. I did everything to stop myself.
It's just obviously ingrained that way. But look, people enjoy themselves in different ways, don't they? And while we're at it, we should have another wee return to this Aberlour 12. Are you getting any kind of anything different from it? For me, I'm getting that more.
It's the sweetening now. I have had the dreaded C word. A few weeks ago, I had the virus, and I have to say, no, I wasn't that ill with it, but I did. Yeah. It was losing my senses. You realise how much 50% a taste is definitely smell.
Wow. Do you know, that's interesting. Maybe we should organise whiskey tasting for people with COVID at the moment, and just because they'll need it described. One of my friends lost all these taste buds for it as well, and he was panicking like you were saying. So you actually do need to kind of develop that language to kind of help people can understand.
It was the smell rather than the taste. I was self-isolating on my birthday, and somebody had dropped off a 12-year-old Glenfiddich.
Right, nice.
So I thought, I'm self-isolating on my birthday, I deserve a rather stiff one. So I and the next day, my smell and taste came back.
Whiskey galore.
All you scientists out there.
A very Trumpian bit of advice there. I like it. Do you know what you mentioned? Non-science-based advice.
That's Joycean.
Joycean science. So I mean, you mentioned obviously there the show coming up, and you're going back to His Majesty's Theatre. that's a home for you as well, isn't it? Obviously, as you mentioned, not just, you know, going back geographically, but that building in itself is somewhere you've performed a lot. How are you feeling about going back to that show? Because it came kind of all of a sudden, didn't it? It wasn't particularly planned.
No, I wanted to be up in the northeast when my mum's 86, and when we're filming a lot, I chose not to do Panto in Glasgow because I wanted to be with Mum, and it was kind of by default. I've ended up back at His Majesty's, but I've been there before. I've also worked for his bar, and I was an usherette at His Majesty's for many years.
Yeah.
There in the teens, and the centenary in 2002. I went back just before I got the soap, actually, and then I returned in 2006 for the centenary, because 1906 His Majesty's opened. So, no, I had some brilliant laughs there as an usherette. We used to have some carry-ons, I'm telling you.
And were you there because you were attracted to theatre, or did being and working there actually expedite your route into performance? Which way around do you feel it worked?
No, it was after I had been at drama college and I was a job an actress, and I worked there just subsidised wages when I was acting. Because in them days it was a lot easier to get a casual job. You could come and go when you weren't doing theatre or telly.
So it was RSCMD you were at as well, wasn't it?
Aye.
So, I mean, you must have known you were heading towards that route then. Obviously not easy to get into the academy. So you must have known how did you first realise that was the place for you to go and that was the route to take?
I didn't really. It just came home. I never really, I mean, I knew I wanted to perform. I did my 6 years at school, and then I did a course in Edinburgh, and then one of the tutors was like, you must audition for RSCMD, and suddenly I was there and was like a fish out of water, I must say.
Wow. And how much of your career do you think comes from doing that type of training, and how much is it from other routes? Do you feel it had much impact at all?
No.
Really? Wow. That's interesting, because it's such a different... I love the theatre there when I've gone there. I never trained in. My wife went to RSAMD, and I love the theatre there. It's such a cool wee, like a small space that feels so much bigger, you know?
Sorry, I'm maybe undermining. I had good times there as well. But I do believe any of the art, particularly performing, you learn it by doing it and finding your wee route yourself. Drama college works for a lot of folk. I found it difficult because I felt as though they were trying to strip away my identity, and I suppose I became very defensive. And it wasn't a world I knew. The real serious theatre was not. I mean, my dad was in a fish, and my mum came from, Crofton folk. So it was a background I knew nothing about. I knew about performing, and I did entertain. So it was quite an alien experience for me initially. You just learn by doing, I think.
Do you know, there was something I really wanted to ask you, Joyce, and I kind of also didn't want to ask you about it because, and it's about accent, right? And because I just imagine all the time people will just ask you about it because we don't have such the variety of accents in Scottish television outside Glasgow. And we were all aware of this. We talked about it all the time. However, I just thought it'd be really interesting because I do come from Glasgow, but I moved around a lot. And when I moved back here, it was almost the first thing that people sort of say to you, that it's almost like they can't listen to you without pointing at your mouth and just going, where are you from? It's like they need that information before we can have any conversation. Did you find that, and how did you find that in TV?
Well, it is such a double-edged sword. See, in Scotland, we're doing it worst enemy when it comes to things, because you'll get folk, if you leave and you are slightly anglified, or if you change your voice, like folk that go across the pond and become slightly transatlantic, they will get slagged. Think they are to be there, Yet, in my case, I suppose it was because I am a great lover of the Scots language, and I write in Scots, and I very much I'd like to think I'm an ambassador in one way or other. I've done a lot of work.
Of course, yeah.
Keeping the language alive. And then, of course, when I went on telly and quite deliberately, you know, said I want to use my own voice, my own tongue, folk, it just was like, that is terrible. Nobody talks like that. I mean, that is just awful. And folk in Aberdeen mortified. Well, I mean, in amongst all the folk that love it, there's a lot of folk that are just like, that is unbearable. So it's so you can't win, really.
do you feel like in some ways, sometimes just when anything stands out, people feel the need to comment on it? They're not sure themselves whether they like that or they don't like that. They just feel like they need to comment on it and need some input from other people.
I think that is human nature. You know, I mean, I get called a sheep quite a lot, but I do think the human race are sheep. You know, in the world that we live in now, when, you know, it's all about diversity and other, you know, as human beings, we're scared of anything that's different. But we know, I do think, you know, it's just ingrained in the human psyche. We're pack animals, I suppose, and anything that they're slightly unsure of. And then again in Scotland, there is that cringe thing as well.
Of course,
to have, you know, we want to be so culturally proud, but then it was almost like I was too Scottish. Oh no, you know what?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, look, culture. There's obviously a lot going on in Scotland as well. There's nationalism, unionism, and all these things are underneath the surface when people have opinions. You know, you think someone's got an issue with an accent, but it's not. It's like, you know, there's other things bubbling under the surface, and what's portrayed on TV then becomes really interesting. I feel can often become kind of smoothed out, and it's interesting that it was such a big thing having you speaking with your accent. Because I'll be honest, when I was on River City, I changed my accent. I was more like that, and I never talked like that. And I don't know, I didn't make a conscious choice. I just started doing that. And I wasn't intended to be untrue to myself. I thought it was true to the character. And then, you know, I see yourself and your performance being completely... Did you change yours? Surely in some ways you must have felt you had to be understood, because being understood is so important.
You have to, I mean, the scripts, not so much now, but when I was in it originally, were all written in English, and I would tweak it into me in dialect as I do now. Obviously, you can't do that all the time, because, for instance, say like a word like week, I would say wick, that last wick, this wick. Can sometimes just, you know, it depends where it lies in the turn of the phrase that you might go, that is just maybe not as you know, accessible enough. But I mean, you think of the diversity of accents that are our Scotland.
Yeah.
Very, you know, very, now it's different, but I mean, 30, 40 years ago, you would have never heard of Broad Dundee, Shetland, you know, Perthshire. You think, you know, you go 10, 15 mile in Scotland and the accent can change dramatically.
Yeah.
Not so much now, because I do feel language is being very much homogenised. I listen to Burns at home, and that's had to do with technology, obviously, because everything is that, rather than, and I get me started on that. But, you know, I mean, I'm in my early 50s. My whole storytelling skills came from my grannies and folk past. It was very much the oral tradition, which is just dying so fast, and that does concern me.
Do you think is there any ways that we can encourage that to be there? Do you feel there's other kind of cast members and stuff you've worked with that are maybe not speaking with their true voice? I'm not particularly talking about people you're working with now, but have you ever kind of felt that there's other people that maybe there's no need, when you talk to them off set, behind the scenes, and then when you see they do a kind of thing up front, do you feel there's other people kind of, we're reaching this middle ground where we're all just agreeing to speak like this, and that's actually kind of a twisting of reality?
I think so. Things that have moved on within television, though, for the better. You are hearing Oh, some of the time, I mean, I think particularly in the Stoke, you hear a lot more, as in voices you would hear in the street compared to maybe what you would have heard in Scotland a few decades ago. I don't know.
See, sometimes when you're just like walking about the streets, sometimes people say the weirdest things in the weirdest accents. You just think, I often think, that wouldn't work in a script, mate. Like, your actual patter wouldn't work in a TV show, and yet it's the truth.
I know. That's why I think there is still that tendency in Scotland when you hear really broad accents that you would hear on the street, or is something slightly comical about it, because we're still it's never been normalised in Scotland. Our own tongue has never been normalised. If you think the broad scows, monk, the Cockney accents down south, and nobody bats an eyelid, but I think it's better than it was, but there is still that but not practical as well at the end of the it is really, because the whole concept of Queen's English, King's English, that was in the beginning of the BBC, that's taken a long time to,
move on a wee bit. Yeah, totally. Do you know, I mean, so for you, going back to River City, then I think people will be delighted to hear. People do, I think, like hearing different accents and stuff now, and it's great to have you back on River City. But what else are you hoping to achieve in your career then now? You said there'd been that hiatus, you kind of felt in terms of River City, the ship had sailed, but here you are, this opportunity returns again. Is there other things that you now would like to achieve in your career as well? Or what do you have planned at the moment, and what would you like to kind of see yourself progressing into?
Being more disciplined with my writing. I've been very lucky, I think, certainly on the stage. I've done all kinds of performing. I mean, I've compared at the concert hall, I've played every woman in Berlin prison, I've done Highland tours, I've done pantomime, So in that regard, I've done a lot, but I would like, I can write, and if I was a bit more disciplined, I'd like, there's no excuse for that. I just need to be more disciplined, and I've got a lot of things and ideas. And
is there something you've not started writing that you really want to write? Something that's been there for a long time? Is there an idea that's been burrowing?
No, I've got a couple that have started, but I've not finished.
Starting's easy, isn't it?
Take a line out of mastermind and maybe started, so I'll finish.
Okay, well, I hope you do get the chance to finish it. And look, I'll let you finish the whiskey here as well. It's been lovely chatting with you, Joyce. Really appreciate it. Have a wee kind of finish, wee slange. Thank you for joining us, everyone, on Tales from the Whisky Office, mixed by Matt Ramsey, and it's a Solid Sounds Productions, recorded in my whisky office. Slange and haste you back. Thank you very much, Joyce. All the best.
Yeah, they will.